Get ready to build strength, power, and slabs of lean muscle. Welcome to the Super Strength Show, featuring motivating stories of success and no BS straight talk from the greatest in the iron game today. Now, here's your host, Ray Toulany.
What's up, Strength Maniacs, and thanks for tuning in. I'm pleased to welcome today's guest, Dr. Joe Klemczewski. Joe is a certified strength and conditioning specialist with degrees in physical therapy, health nutrition, health education, and literary journalism. He was one of the first professionals to pass the International Society of Sports Nutrition accrediting examination. Joe earned pro status with a win at the ANPPC World Cup. He has competed in pro bodybuilding's largest venues with top 5 finishes at the Mr. International and Mr. Universe contests. Joe created a wellness corporation, a fitness facility, and a sports supplement company specializing in proprietary protein formulations. He began licensing the Diet Doc business model in 2007 and has helped develop almost 70 Diet Doc weight loss centers across the world. You can connect with him by visiting his website at www.thedietdoc.com. That's THEDIETDOC.com. Joe, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And if you wouldn't mind, we'd like to, maybe have you share a little bit more about yourself. A lot there to share.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Fantastic show and just an honor to be here. Yeah, you covered quite a bit there. I'm not sure I have much more to say, but, maybe just a little bit of my early background. Like most people, I think, who get interested in strength training or the just physical performance sports. I started out as a small child interested in athletics. And interestingly for me, I was kind of unhealthy, came from a family who just was not really into sports or health, nutrition, that kind of thing. So it took kind of hitting that pre-pubescent age when all of a sudden I started caring about what I looked like and comparing myself to other kids and really got into it, developed a fun baseball career, kept training. And along the way, actually started lifting seriously around age 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. And, from that point on, once athletics fell away, I kept training, was always a little bit interested in the bodybuilding culture. So by the time I had graduated with a degree in physical therapy, I was really pursuing strength models, periodization, a lot of research there from Dr. Kramer and the early guys. Very fervently, really loved it. And the performance side, the strength side was always my cup of tea. And then I continued on just because of my bodybuilding interests, moving into health and nutrition, primarily, again, just for fun, just for me to kind of learn that stuff. Never thought I'd use it as a career. Mm-hmm. But once I finished my first doctorate in nutrition, I decided, this is just too fun. Physical therapy is fantastic, but I really want to do something entrepreneurial. So went that direction and started my what became the Diet Doc Corporation. And 20 years later, here we are.
Yeah, here we are for sure. I mean, many locations later, you have quite the bodybuilding career as well. And I got to tell you, congratulations on all of that.
Thank you. It was fun. It was part of that development. Like I said, when you're 11, 12, 13 years old, what could be better? Either getting in trouble doing something or being constructive and learning, about discipline and all those things that can help later in life. And I think they did. I
would say so. Yeah. I mean, all of those various endeavors that we're in when we're younger. It's surprising how later on in life, I'm talking almost like I'm sounding like I'm 100 years old or something, but no, it's interesting how even the slightest thing later on, you look back and you think, wow, that actually, had a bit of an effect on me. So, competing at the level that you were, and obviously the education that you have definitely has had a very interesting outcome with you. So I guess looking back, 2020 hindsight is always perfect, they say. It's kind of obvious to a certain degree you're where you're at, considering the skill set that you have and whatnot. But no, definitely very successful. So I'm looking forward to getting into this. But I do want to ask you a quick question here. Being that you've competed in bodybuilding at a high level, and just recently at the Arnold's, there's a bit of talk going on with Arnold. He had some comments in regards to the physiques that you see on today's bodybuilding stages. And in particular, he was referring to, the the GH gut as a, one term that's used quite a bit. They don't quite have that aesthetic, pleasing proportions that they had in the past. Now they're, it's basically a mass monster game is what it is.
Right.
So I'd be interested just getting your opinion on all of that. What do you have to say about that?
But yeah, I think it's really hard to go back to that when people have the advantage, especially if something's not tested. I mean, you look today, and in golf or baseball, they have equipment rules. They have things that really regulate people. They're tested. They're looked at. And when it's just kind of a Wild West free-for-all, who's not going to push the envelope as far as they can? And if that gives you the advantage, it's just going to happen. And, I think even the guys who come up and, maybe aren't using the drugs quite as heavily or maybe not at all, there's definitely a cycle to that career span where they start gaining some size. Of course, that helps. They can get leaner and hold that mass. That helps. But then eventually you start getting some of these side effects that are not quite appealing. And you might still see those guys in the running, and that becomes the new standard, which it has. But as Arnold said, he wants to see it kind of go back where some of that look is penalized. Possibly even that would, be a determinant in making sure people don't abuse things quite that far.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You've pointed out something I think that's really important. Ultimately, if they're being rewarded for that, that look, they're not being penalized for it, then you really can't blame the competitors because they're in there to win, right? They're in it to win.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're going to do absolutely everything you can.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard some people say that maybe the vacuum pose should become a mandatory pose of some sort. And, I mean, obviously that would definitely address that midsection issue. And there are guys, like I've seen some examples of some guys who have some serious mass on them, and they're able to hold a vacuum. So, it's not that it's impossible to do, but anyway, it'd be interesting to see how this plays out moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so with all of that being said, let's jump into the first question of the show here, if you're ready for it.
Super.
Alrighty, so first one is wondering if you could share one of your favorite success quotes and an example of how you've applied its meaning to your training and life.
Yeah, this one is kind of cliche, but it jumps out at me first, and that is, of course, that success is a journey, not a destination. Philosophically, I learned early in life to really embrace that, and I don't know why. I just looked at the fact that my experience is what I want to focus on, not any particular gain or status. And so I just have the aptitude to be able to let things go. I can, as the classic business book says, letting go of good to get great, or from good to great. And that's always been my mantra. I'm kind of working on my fourth or fifth career, and I don't mind completely steering my ship in a 90-degree angle to do something I think is going to be more compelling or more fun. And so it is, to me, it's all about the experience. It's all about where I'm going to spend my time and resources is not going to be to attain something, but to really dig in and have fun and have an impact that I want with other people.
Yeah, it takes some courage to make those changes. When you hear, we hear that a lot when it comes to success as a journey, enjoy the journey and whatnot. I mean, ultimately a goal, I kind of liken it to like a mountaintop, and the peak is the goal. And if you ever take a look at it, the peak doesn't represent much of that actual journey. So it's very fleeting and passing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So focusing on the journey and then, right away moving on to another goal is very important. What would you say to somebody who doesn't, isn't quite sure, like, what does that mean? Because I know the first time I heard that, I kind of was like, well, what does that really mean? Because shouldn't I be focusing on the goal? Isn't that kind of the whole purpose of all of this?
Well, and yeah, you definitely want to focus on something. I mean, when you have a single-minded goal, absolutely pursue it. But whether it's you're spending more time on that and allocating more of your life toward it for a certain span, I think that's perfect. I've come to kind of detest the word balance, because everybody talks about, well, I need more balance and I need to do this, I need to do that. And again, we put all these just constructs on our shoulders and say, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
Well, Joseph Campbell said, follow your bliss. If that means that you give your life wholeheartedly to one thing and that's what you love, then fantastic, do it. I tend to do that, but I can change gears quickly. I can get really excited about something and move toward it. And another philosopher said this is kind of the plight of man, that as soon as we achieve something at about an 80% level, we get bored and we want to do something else. And I've found that embracing that, to allow yourself the ability and the time to make those changes, just makes life more rewarding, more fun.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's interesting that 80% quote that you just said. I know sometimes if I listen to a song and if I really get the lyrics down, the song
You're done.
Yeah, it just it's like, okay, time to move on to the next one. Not to say that I won't listen to it or enjoy it by any means, but that mystery, that chase to a certain degree has kind of gone away. Yeah. And when you say Joseph Campbell, I think you're referring to A Hero's Journey.
Yeah.
Fantastic book. Yeah, that was really good. Star Wars, Lucas actually based that whole story off that. Yeah, that was awesome. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is sharing a story of a time in your training when you encountered a major challenge. And if you could take us to that time in your life and tell us a story and share the lessons that you learned.
Sure. My training journey, like I said, was probably my first love of any type of performance sport. And I got involved in trying to improve for baseball as a young child. And I did. I was able to go from this chubby little kid who was completely non-athletic to, within a couple years, being on all-star teams, winning city championships, that kind of stuff. And when I moved on to bodybuilding, I started very low on the rung. I remember in my first show placing last and taking years and years to climb upward. And as I'm learning and developing, you kind of hit those next levels from maybe a novice division to an open division, then winning a pro card. And every single level I started was always placing last. That's the very first show at every level. That's exactly where I ended up. And so it made me always go back a little bit hungrier. What am I going to do now? And for me, part of it was always intellectual. It's not just training harder. It's what am I missing? What do I not know that's out there that I could apply? And I think that's what really drove me academically was, ironically, it wasn't to cure cancer or to get PhDs and things just so I could be, a scholar in an ivory tower. It was always just to apply it to my own life. And it's always that climb, like you said, climb to the summit that's most fun. And I think my greatest challenge along the way was when I was experiencing some of those successes, getting stronger. I really started, of course, accumulating some injuries. And now that I'm in my mid-40s, those things are not just harder to shake off because soft tissue, muscle, particularly scars and so forth. And so you end up with some things that just aren't going to leave you where you were when you were 20. You have to make some adjustments. Mm-hmm. And I can remember this one time. This is probably the best little story I have. I was climbing toward a 500-pound squat. That was my goal. Mm-hmm. And I had a certain amount of time I was going to really push for it. I developed an entire nutrition and strength training regimen to focus on that goal. And right about the last 2 weeks, I started getting this tightness in my upper thoracic area. And I thought, man, this is going to impede me. It's going to be tough. So the day, and at this point I owned my own gym. So the day I was going to attempt my 500-pound squat, everything had gone perfectly. I was moving up every 2 weeks. My weight was moving up how I wanted it to. I woke up with this massive strain in my upper back. It was just, I thought I was done. And I thought, okay, what can I do? How can I still get this? Because there's no way I'm going to let this slide. And at the time, I was lifting very raw. I didn't use any knee straps. I didn't use a suit, anything. Mm-hmm. So I took a knee wrap. And I thought, I'm going to just wrap this around my rib cage as tight as I can, maybe mitigating the pain just enough that I can still get this done. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, that compression made the lift actually easier. So all of a sudden, 500 pounds felt easier than 455. But one of the things that did for me was showed me, number one, I'm a risk taker, and that was kind of stupid. But number two, there's never anything that's going to get in my way to completely sidetrack me. I'm always going to find a way to work around something, work through something, work over something, under. There's absolutely nothing, if I want to accomplish that is going to stop me. And that was just one of those small instances where that confirmed that trait in me and gave me more confidence to just go out on a limb. And as I said, chase those experiences, not necessarily for the ultimate goal, but just because you have one life, and that's what I'm going to make of it.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's for what it makes of you, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's excellent. You know what? It's interesting because we put our bodies on the line when we train, and depending on how hard you're pushing yourself, but there's that fine line. How do you walk that fine line, that razor's bleeding edge between going too far and not pushing quite hard enough?
Yeah, that's what I would almost share for the what I wish I knew then kind of question, because
if you want to save it till then, we can do that.
Well, yeah, I'll give you just a little sneak peek for that, and that is, of course, what I would say as far as staying on that edge is, understanding that we're dealing with soft tissue, muscles, tendons, ligaments, things like that. They just like the brake pads on your car. There is a lifespan, life expectancy, and when there's damage or wear and tear, you're not going to get that back. And so probably taking a little bit more time to not always train quite as heavy, is something that I do now. I will say that since I stopped competing and I don't have that ultimate date where I have to look my best and so forth, and so I have to make the most of every single workout, every single off season, I'm just a little more patient to look at the big picture. And I think that's where I can say, staying on that razor's edge is still much part of the pursuit for me. Mm-hmm. A lot of people would say, well, you don't compete anymore, so how do you maintain that intensity? Man, I train just as hard now as I did when I was 12 years old, looking for that first home run. And it's just because the pursuit is ingrained in that love of the feeling, the love of being under the squat bar or just in the gym, mm-hmm. and that self-development, that just pure joy of movement and exertion. It's once you've done that, as you know, there's nothing better. So you pile in all of the things in between, powerlifting contest, bodybuilding contest, all that. Those are fun. It builds a lot of camaraderie. It sets those external goals. But for me, it's knowing that I have the rest of my life to train, and I still want to be training this hard when I'm 80. So let's stay on that edge, making sure I know which side, I could fall on to my detriment.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's funny because all the young guys are the ones that are training super hard. Then as people get older, they tend not to really do much physical activity. And the reality is it's inversely proportionate in terms of the importance, right? As you get older, you really need to stay active. But if you were maybe not so smart earlier, you kind of, mess things up for yourself later on. So yeah, I think your advice is extremely important. Definitely something to keep in mind. And don't use it as an excuse to, not push yourself, but don't be an idiot either.
Right. Yeah. I've done both. Trust me.
Yeah. I think the majority of us have. I think it's a matter of hopefully what you did wasn't a catastrophic failure. Therefore, you can kind of recover and keep moving forward, and hopefully you take some wisdom with it.
Yep.
Okay, next question. Wondering if you could share a story of a time in your training when you had a breakthrough moment, and if you could take us back and tell us the steps you took to turn that light bulb moment into success.
Yeah, that's easy for me because I could point to one almost every 3 or 4 months. I really get these great ideas of following a certain protocol or developing them. Way back when, and I'm going back probably 20 years ago, as I was reading Dr. Kramer and those guys and all of their work in undulating periodization. It really started to make sense to me because I had been making a lot of inroads with my training, of course, just modifying what you would read from Flex Magazine or Muscle and Fitness. Back in my day, I'm watching Rich Gaspari and Lee Haney and all those guys. And, of course, their training was all pretty much the same, at least what the ghostwriters are put in the magazines, which is train every body part twice a week. Mm-hmm. And my goal was to, every time I walked in the gym, I wanted to be able to train as intensely as possible. So I had to really prioritize recovery. And my first real breakthrough moment was when I kind of designed a program looking, of course, at micro periodization, because you don't want the typical 3-month strength, 3-month power kind of thing that you use for college athletes. And I really saw myself able to train each body part a couple times a week, but focusing on different angles, different types of training, different energy systems, and to be able to continue to make just upward spiraling gains without those setbacks, without ever feeling like you were plateauing. And so my version of what ended up being known as just nonlinear periodization became a model for about a decade that a lot of people used. And to this day, I use it as a base where you're just really backing off. So you're not squatting, twice a week. It might be once every 2 weeks, and working in a lot of auxiliary movements and so forth. And now, of course, the pendulum has swung the other direction, and people like Mike Zordos, Lane, they're all recommending, squatting, deadlifting 2 to 4 times a week, just with a lot less volume, working on technique and so forth. And, I've tried both. And I would say every time I try something new and I really try and uncover how this can work for some people and why, it really is a breakthrough movement. When I traveled with those guys through Australia a couple of years ago and then back to the States doing a lot of camps and conferences with them, I said, guys, I want to train like you. I want you to develop protocols that I can look at, and I want to study them. I want to break them apart. I want to try it. And I was rehabbing from a couple injuries, and that increased frequency, increased volume really did help. But I quickly found that as greedy as I can be, it's tough for me to not hold back on the intensity. And so I can very quickly find that extra volume is not helpful. But again, breakthrough moments, I have one probably every year because I'm always still to this day experimenting with brand new types of training and really trying to sort it all out and figure, who it can help and how and when and why. Yeah,
that's awesome. A yearning for learning. That's good. It's good. It sounds like reading Rainbow, but that's what I sound like I just did something off of that show. But you're right. Great. I mean, it's impressive that you can have those breakthroughs. I mean, every year, right? As long as you're experimenting and learning. The twice a week, I've heard a lot of guys say a lot of good things about twice a week. And then obviously, as you said, the other guys, they've recommended some higher frequency. Some old school guys from way back have done some high frequency, like a specific movement, like a deadlift almost every day, like 4 or 5 days a week. Obviously volume and intensity is adjusted. Yeah, I think that, kind of brings out an important point, which is maybe the psychological factor of training and what is your personality and makeup. Yeah, as you said, you found it somewhat challenging to control yourself because, it sounds like you're a guy that likes to go for broke, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately and fortunately.
Okay. Joe, if you don't mind, would you be able to share what achievement are you most proud of when it comes to your training?
Oh, wow. When it comes to training, I was about ready to go in a whole other direction there. Real life stuff, but training, like I said.
Well, that was actually a follow-up question of mine. So,
Okay.
Go for it.
Training. Gosh, I would have to say, getting that 500-pound squat that I mentioned and a 500-pound deadlift. For some reason, those numbers in my mind really stuck out as goals when I started training for power. And I'm a pretty small guy, 5'7.5", super tiny joints. When I'm, contest ready, my waist is 27 inches. I competed at 150 pounds. So most of my off seasons were spent at 165, 175 pounds. So to reach a 500-pound deadlift raw at 170-ish pounds in my early 30s, and then I just had a very difficult time climbing toward that on a deadlift, and I just worked my butt off until finally in my late 30s I hit that. So both of those moments, I can remember those days, those workouts, who was with me, and those feelings of finally getting that. Those were big for me.
Yeah, that feeling just. I've conquered. I've achieved. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, the follow-up question, which we alluded to a moment ago, and you were going to jump off with, which is in life, what is one of your proudest achievements?
Gosh, I have my oldest son graduating from college this year, and he actually turns 21 in a couple months. And we have 4 children. My wife and I have been together, married for going on 24 years, and it's just, as we talked a little bit earlier, a matter of enjoying that journey and growing through it. And I would say to anybody, matter of fact, I have a friend in Canada who is getting married this year and just had some communication with him. And so you're giving them all that cliche advice about being married and finding that soulmate and so forth. And it's just about, wow, you're going to face a lot of ups and downs. And for you to really understand yourself and that there's not one single moment or incident that you can't recover from. Those are things I'm learning. I just finished a master's degree in literary journalism with a concentration in social science, and that's what I love to write. And I was so impacted by that I'm staying in. I'm starting another master's degree this summer in social anthropology, and all of those interests to me in the psych and social science world are just simply trying to understand the human experience, the journey we're on. And so I can't say that there's one specific thing I'm most proud of, except the fact that I have an incredible family that I'm able to share this with. And, they have to tolerate a lot of weirdness from their husband and their dad, but, we're in it together, and I love it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's interesting. You always hear that stat, which I've actually heard is not necessarily true. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Okay, even if it is true, why are we always focused on that one? Why aren't we focused on the ones that actually turn out well? You know what I mean? I think sometimes, by focusing on the wrong thing, we lead ourselves down that path of inevitable doom or failure. So, it's good to hear when somebody says, it is what it is. It's not always sunshine and rainbows, but guess what? You stick with it, and you eventually find those pots of gold along the way, right?
I'm learning that.
Well, congratulations. Good for you guys. And what's your wife's name?
My wife's name is Tracy.
Okay. Well, Tracy, you seem to be doing a good job with Joe here. So
keeping me in check.
Yeah. And make sure we got to thank her for, giving us the time for us to do this interview. So let's jump into the next question. And that is, what is one thing that has you amped up to train right now? You said a moment ago or a little earlier that you still train with the same intensity that you did before. What is it that keeps you going year after year after year?
Yeah, I had a series of, I don't want to call them minor injuries, but they were kind of big, where it seemed like once a year as I was getting over one thing, I would kind of have something else happen. And the first one was piriformis syndrome that was so devastating that I thought I had a herniated disc in my back. I actually have a bulging disc, but I could not sit, I couldn't stand, I needed help to get in and out of a chair, and that lasted for 6 to 9 months. I had done 2 Medrol dose packs. So finally, a friend of mine who's a neurosurgeon just said, you're just going to have to wait it out, it'll get better. So about a year later, finally, I just could not do anything for about a year. So I'm better, I'm back in the gym. Then I had a complete dislocation of my ankle, where my foot was about up by my knee, tore ligaments on both sides, tore my peroneal muscles on the side, chipped the bone, in my medial malleolus. So it's like, okay, now I'm back to, I can't even walk for 6 weeks. And then, after that, some IT band syndrome that took a lot of injections and so forth. So it was just I was watching my strength go from kind of a peak in my upper 30s, younger 40s to just nothing. So right now, Ray, I am just jacked that I've had about a year of solid training. Squat and deadlift are back to about 75%. Yesterday, I was doing treadmill sprints at 10 miles an hour, which I'm climbing slowly, with hamstring, glute, piriformis issues and an ankle. That just wasn't happening. So I feel like I'm 20 years old again, just really climbing back up. And I'm as excited every day about my training as I was back then.
I got to ask, what in the world happened to your ankle? That was in the gym?
That's basketball.
Oh, man, that sounds terrible. Holy.
The typical thing where you just come down and instead of my foot landing on somebody else's foot, went up for a really high rebound, my heel came down on the top of somebody's foot. So it completely just rolled down to the floor and I heard it crack. I've broken my leg before, and when you hear and feel a bone break, what's happened. And I did. I'm like, guys, it's broken. I'm done. Somebody needs to carry me in my truck. And that was another tough one, but you heal and you move on.
Yeah. It's good to know that you're on the mend. Damn. Yeah. When you say that, I think to myself, every time I can do a rep and I'm healthy, every healthy workout, kind of going back to enjoy the journey, man, I should be grateful, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, good to know you're back on the road to health there. So let's get into the next section, which is the superset round. And this is a series of rapid-fire Q&A. When you're ready, I'll start firing them off.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, first one. Who inspired you to start lifting?
My old baseball coach, Burley Berg, who at the time when I was 12 years old, he was in his 70s. So just, I know he's gone. Haven't even, didn't even see him for 20 or 30 years after that. But, I still remember him like it was yesterday.
Old school, huh?
Absolutely. Just, I was a catcher and he said, man, you got to get your arms stronger. We got to get you lifting weights. Got to lift weights, boy. And so I went out in my dad's garage with, dusted off the old cement weights, Joe Weider weights, and away I went.
Well, that's saying a lot because a lot of trainers in sports and whatnot, coaches, sometimes, even till today, they're hesitant sometimes to put people in the gym and make them lifting weights. So he was definitely thinking, he's a forward thinker for sure. And I'm assuming he's passed on now.
Yeah, and that's you find those people who just change your life. It's great to go through and say, what would my life be like if I hadn't met that one single person? And he's just one of those guys.
Yeah, well, R.I.P. I guess to him then. It's amazing that just how it's amazing how one little thing just completely changes your course, right, in your life.
Yep.
So yeah, fantastic.
Yep.
Okay, what is the best advice you ever received?
I would just have to say, be patient, and going back to that Success Series quote about the journey, just to slow down, take it all in, and live with no regrets. That's just it. I do not want to at any point in time when I'm done to say, man, I wish I would have. I'm gonna do it all.
Yeah, man. Yeah, because otherwise, just imagine being at the end of the road and having a whack of regrets, especially shoulda, woulda, couldas. That to me is
none. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, man. That to me, if there's such thing as a living hell, you would still be alive, I guess, for that moment. Just knowing that the lights are going out and that's the last thought that you had in your mind. Oh man, no thanks.
Yep.
Okay, how about this one? What is a piece of advice you follow now, but you heard before but didn't follow it the first, when you initially heard it, and you looking back, you say to yourself, you know what, I really wish I followed that when I first heard it.
Boy, that is a tough one. I would probably have to go back to impulsiveness, kind of the dark side of what I'm talking about, of being very hypervigilant and excitable, is you can just kind of go in one direction with blinders on. And now, through some of the failings, we've talked a lot about our successes and so forth, but through failings in business and otherwise, I've just learned to really back off, take my time, analyze things, and make decisions with a little bit more information than just that initial gut reaction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that gut reaction becomes handy once you have good knowledge, in your head. But prior to that, it can sometimes get you into trouble.
Yep.
Okay. If you could recommend one training resource for our listeners, what would it be? And it could be anything from, information, equipment, you name it. What would you recommend?
I would recommend a functional anatomy book. One of the things that I think gave me some real success early was the fact that I was in physical therapy school learning all this anatomy, physiology, functional movement. And you see some of these guys today moving up into the strength world with that rehab background, showing people not just restorative techniques and so forth, but just when you understand movement patterns and you understand the kinesiology behind, what you're trying to accomplish, it really changes things in your brain when you can visually see where that origin and insertion is and how those muscle fibers can approximate two bones and, all that stuff. As you said, once that knowledge is in there, you're going on autopilot. But otherwise, I think for a lot of people, it's just very murky and they don't get it. So they're just in the gym moving around without ever really feeling that sense of purpose in every single rep. I remember it was either Arnold Palmer or Greg Norman, the golfer. One of those guys said, every single golf ball I've hit in my life had a purpose. Yeah. He doesn't just go out and hit 1,000 balls on the range just blindly. Every single shot he wanted to shape a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that practice, perfect practice makes perfect execution. Yeah. So functional anatomy, anything like that, learn the basics before you hit the gym.
Oh man, 100%. I would agree with you on that. Mind muscle connection, and when you can actually, when you know what you're supposed to be visualizing and activating, it makes, it quite a bit easier. So really good advice. I remember Arnold talking about how he got his hands on an anatomy book. I think him and Franco, and it was a big help to them. Yeah, excellent.
Good.
Okay, tell us something about yourself that nobody would ever guess.
Oh gosh, yeah, we could go for a long time here, but outside of all the analytical stuff that you've heard me talk about, I just love the creative processes. So, one of the reasons why I went into a program of creative writing, I went into it to learn just more about fiction, and I've written several books in fiction and social science worlds. I write poetry and song lyrics. Those are the kind of things that I just love to do. To this day, my hobbies when I'm just trying to, do something different, they are, learning guitar, learning more about even songwriting, the art of it, the science of it, not just writing down a few words that can rhyme and so forth. So, I think I really have as strong a creative streak in me as I do in analytical. And it's funny because I don't think that comes across in my profession very much. So it's definitely more part of my hobby life.
Huh. You weren't joking. You really do want to do it all, huh?
I cram a lot into 24 hours.
Yeah, I'm getting, for some odd reasons, I'm getting images here in my head of like a samurai sitting down the tea ceremony. He's got the poetry going. Then at the same time, he could, chop you into 20 pieces. So it's just interesting how, whole body, whole person, you're just kind of expressing it all and exploring it all.
Yeah, and I love that word, explorer. I think, back in those days, Lewis and Clark and so forth, those guys who just couldn't sit still.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, but these days you don't have to use a boat to get there.
Yeah, that must have been unreal. Just knowing that you're somewhere that really nobody else has been before, and what's over the next horizon. That's unreal. I can kind of imagine how that would literally just magnetize people with that mindset. They just can't help it. They got to know what's over there. What's over there.
Yep, and that's me. That's the way I live.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, if you could work out with anyone, past or present, who would it be?
I would have to go back to some of my original icons. Lee Haney was just my idol for so long. Watching him, and so I would have to say, he would be probably my first pick.
Mass with class. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What is your definition of success in the gym?
Yeah, it's just having that connection with the workout, being 100% present, so that as I keep coming back to, I love every single rep, every single set, and I can walk away saying that was 30 minutes or 60 minutes or 90 minutes well spent. I didn't just accomplish something, quote unquote. I loved that time. To me, that's church, being in the gym, when I can get into that mindset of loving it and not wanting to be anywhere else. I started out that way when I was 11, 12 years old, and I'm still there.
Man, you're making me want to train right now. And I already trained this morning. Having that purpose, that intention with every single movement, rep, exercise in the gym, I imagine, does that help, put you in that state?
Yeah, and when you go into it, that's why I have to get away from distractions. I tried having a home gym, 2 or 3 times in my life, and of course, there's always something happening. One of your kids are coming up, or in between sets, you find yourself folding laundry. And for the same reason, I can't do commercial gyms. I have my own private gym in our training facility, and I go in there, I put headphones on, and staff knows you don't bother Joe when he's in the gym. I want to be there, and it's my time.
Awesome. Okay, Joe, this next one is one we like to have fun with. All right. And if you don't mind, when you answer the question, if you can provide some specifics so our listener can take this information away and act on it, it'd be fantastic if you could do that for us. All right. Okay. You wrapping up one of your workouts. You just finished up your shower. You're getting dressed. Catch a whiff. You're like, gee, smells like somebody else needs to take a shower. You turn around. I'm standing there. Joe, what's up? You're like, Ray, you just finished a workout? What's going on here, man? You got to take a shower. I'm like, no. I just got out of DeLorean, man. Here's the keys. Full tank of garbage. You can have at it. Going back in time, knowing what you now know, how would you structure your training to get the most out of it? And if you don't mind, again, if you could give us those details so we can really, act on this information.
Yeah, I think I was really caught up in the story there. I was like, man, keys, DeLorean, and Ray's right behind me, all stinky, and like, okay, it's good setup. So you're a good fiction writer yourself. I would say, going back there, it's tough to say that I could avoid certain injuries by being more careful. But I've got a herniated disc in my neck, a bulging disc in my low back, torn ACL and cartilage in my knee. That's all these little injuries that I've done, either in the gym or in sports. You'd always love to say, man, if I could have just changed one thing, if I warmed up a little more, if I stretched, if I just stepped that way, so that way, what could I have done? And so I'm always going back thinking specifically, if I could give this advice to somebody, if I could live my life over and be just a little safer. And so I wonder if, not quite pushing to 100% full throttle every single workout at the end of every single set, if that would have helped. Because again, those are the kind of things, it's unfortunate. You see some of these great power lifters when they're 60 years old walking around with canes. Mary Lou Retton had 2 hip replacements by the time she was 40 years old. And I don't want to be that person. As much as I've enjoyed physical activity and training, I do not want to be that person when I'm hitting, my 50s and 60s and 70s. So if I could give anybody specific advice, it's number one, take care of injuries. Number two, just really pay attention to how far you can push it, but when is it appropriate to back off? Because, not every single workout, every single day has to be max for you to get the benefit. And that definitely was not my mindset for the first 20 or 30 years. So that's the one thing I would go back and change, is just trying to be a little bit more careful.
How would you alternate the intensity? How would you set that up? Would you have one day where you're pushing it, very close to the limit, and the next day maybe back off a bit, like the old school, heavy, medium, light days? How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, but unfortunately with me, my light work was always actually more intense, because now I'm doing giant sets and super sets. And if I'm, for example, if I just squatted max heavy a week ago, and now I might be leaving the squat out, but I'm doing hacks or leg press. Now I'm supersetting 2 or 3 pre-exhaust movements into it. I'm still doing 10 forced reps at the end because it's, a little bit lighter weight. So I've got a partner to push me. And that's the kind of thing I'm trying to learn even now to back off from and say, you just don't have to hit maximum threshold every single time. And it's difficult for me, but I think that would have helped me, like you said, I haven't had any catastrophic things. I'm still walking upright and training, but I think I could have avoided some of these injuries and maybe some future pain just by that.
So what would you say to guys who are concerned that they may kind of get called out, that are not pushing themselves hard enough every time in the gym? Because if you go online nowadays, YouTube and whatnot, everything is all about just pushing it to the limit, every single set, every single rep, every single workout, day after day after day after day. That's kind of the attitude. Let's not BS ourselves. That a lot of guys that tend to train tend to have, an intense type of a personality. The guys especially who like to push it, obviously, that aggression, they got a healthy level of aggression and testosterone. So that it's appealing, that image, that heavyweight, driving hard, pushing hard. What would you say to the guys who are concerned, what, man, if I don't push hard enough, I'm going to feel like I'm a cop-out, a sellout, or maybe, guys are going to make fun of me, pick on me. What would you say to those guys?
Well, it's definitely a trusting in the science perspective. And I really like the concrete way that Mike Zordos explains it when he says, okay, if a 10 rep max is kind of the standard, let's just say that's the gold standard. When he's working with clients and he's saying, okay, this is how I want you to back off, not just calling it, quote, light or medium intensity. We want to do a 6 or a 10 minus 4, something like that. So when you get to 6, or when you get to a rep that you think, okay, I could probably do 4 more, that's where you need to stop. You need to leave some in the tank. And I would always periodize workouts where I could still hit that max threshold just in different ways through different energy systems. So instead of just completely, anaerobic, it might be more glycolytic or even aerobic. But I still just wanted to keep the pedal down every single workout. And that might have been somewhat effective when I was in my 20s, a little more resilient. But, now I see the value in just knowing that we're structuring this in a way to really plan for, 1 max lift per month or something like that. So, just rely on the science, sit back and realize that your day's coming for those max lifts, but there's setup time to get there.
Yeah. And the guy who's the man or the woman who's the woman, if you want to say it that way too, is the one who sticks with the plan, right?
Right.
Yeah. So if it's a, quote unquote light day, or a day when you only do 6 and leave 4 in the tank, the person who is really sticking to it and is the real hardcore guy or woman is the one who sticks to the plan.
Yeah, that's where it takes discipline. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah, discipline. There you go. Yeah, and then that discipline is elusive for a lot of people, but
yep.
And I think that kind of is an indication of maturity. You also said that in your 20s you were a little bit more resilient, so you can get away with doing those things. But could it not be argued that you weren't as strong as you were in your 30s and early 40s, right? So you weren't moving as much weight either. So your body wasn't quite taking the I don't want to say abuse, but you weren't cutting into the recovery reserves, and you weren't really working it as hard.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair, but you also have to look at just the adaptive levels of the human body. So, I remember back when I was 18, 19 years old, and, for me, squatting heavy might have been 185 or something, but, with the amount of bone mass and just, muscle fiber thickness and so forth, that could have been as powerful and as potentially catastrophic as 500, in my late 30s. Mm-hmm. So, there's always a relative aspect that you just can't truly understand. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But you're definitely right. I mean, that's what my body could handle back then, and that was max.
Okay. So yeah, and essentially what I was kind of getting at was, as you get stronger and as you're moving more and more weight, you need to understand that it's not so much that you're necessarily getting older per se. You got to also factor in that you're lifting 3 times as much in the movement.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Yeah,
absolutely a huge factor.
Yeah, because a lot of guys automatically say, "Oh, I'm getting old." It's like, well, man, you like as I just said, you're doing triple body weight in a deadlift. When you started, you could barely lift half your body weight. So,
right.
Okay. Another thing I just want to dig in, if you don't mind, you'd mentioned the different energy systems, anaerobic, aerobic, glycolytic. If you don't mind, could you maybe just give us a little bit of an explanation as to what those are and what do they mean?
Yeah, a lot of people just understand more anaerobic and aerobic. And aerobic, we think of you get on a treadmill and run, or you go outside, and it takes a couple minutes for you to completely burn through all of your blood products, your blood glucose, the fatty acids floating around your bloodstream, and then you're dumping out liver glycogen. And at the same time, your adipose tissues are pumping out triglycerides to be used, gradually, but that's kind of later. And that's so inefficient, obviously, that your body has to use oxygen when you get into the whole biochemistry, Krebs cycle kind of stuff. So, a runner, for example, knows that there's kind of a painful transition. You get on the treadmill or bike and you're just going. It's like, man, this is great. I feel good. I'm moving. Then all of a sudden you're like, wow, this doesn't feel good. I'm not. It's hard to breathe. But then you coast through that, and you've moved from the anaerobic, glycolytic, and then into the aerobic. And most people lifting weights understand just the opposite, which is, when you're done with the ATP in the muscle that can no longer fire and you're using some muscle glycogen, you can no longer move that weight, you're done. That's anaerobic failure. Glycolytic is that 1.5 to maybe 2.5 minute time frame where you're using it all. I mean, you're definitely going through the ATP, the glucose in your bloodstream, you're tapping into muscle glycogen, you're resynthesizing ATP, and so you're making your body go through everything you can. You're getting into that oxygen debt, but it's in that time frame. It's kind of like a boxing round. When you see those guys go out there in the fight, and by the end of that round, they can barely lift their arms, they can barely saunter back to their corners, and that's just giving it all. Of course, they could continue to walk or run, do something aerobic, but that glycolytic energy system for muscle tissue is still very valuable. That's where the giant sets and, not just putting the reps in, but truly failing in those glycolytic energy system ranges has some real value to training in many different ways. It helps you posturally, all the smaller muscle groups that are there for stability and so forth that are really having to work hard and catch up. You just get this iron type posture and body where you're not just all about one and done. Your body is so much more resilient that even when you're in those heavy strength movements, there's such greater adaptation. And that's been a huge advantage to me throughout my years. Is I've trained like that, all energy systems, the entire time I've been lifting, And so it's just made me, I think, a lot more structurally sound in some of the lifts.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I never heard it described like that, and that your the stabilizers and postural muscles kind of get hammered at that point. You don't see too many giant sets. Supersets you'll see every now and then, not a lot, and giant sets you definitely don't. And giant sets are more than 2 sets, correct? Back to back.
Yeah. Giant, yeah. So you're doing 3 or 4. I had a coach one time, a friend of mine who was a world record holder in the squat. Mm-hmm. He was a Division I strength coach who won back-to-back championships with small powerlifting teams. I mean, the guy is a legend, and he was a good friend of mine, trained me for about a year, and he said, Joe, I've never seen anybody, I mean, in any squat, your back is always in neutral, it never moves. Any deadlift, if I can put a piece of paper between the weight and the floor, if you even start to move the weight, I know what's coming up. You never fail. Your back never gives nothing. And it's because of that. It's because I've always trained with those higher rep ranges as well as the just strength-based training. But again, it wasn't just, quote, light. It was with massive intensity going deep into failure in those glycolytic energy system ranges. And I think that's just something that people miss out on functionally, athletically, and how that can translate even into power movements.
Yeah, this is, this is really interesting. The 70s, Arnold's era, those guys back then are the guys I think of, Serge Nubret, supersets, giant sets, a lot of that going on there. Also, I find Bud Jeffries is somebody who's written some very interesting books, and he talks about training, low rep strength, medium kind of 1-2 minutes worth of effort, similar to what you're talking about right now, glycolytic, and then higher rep work. Usually, it doesn't have to be, but it could be like high rep swings or high rep body weight exercises like calisthenics or whatnot. When I trained like that, when I'm doing those type of workouts where I'm incorporating all of the energy systems, you just feel like a machine. And it's very interesting that you say that now, because I've had someone before comment to me that upper back wise pretty solid and stable and whatnot in certain lifts. They're like, wow, your zerchers are really, really good. And now that you say that, I'm thinking that's probably from all the stone carries and high rep kettlebell swings I've done.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no question.
Okay, so to end off this thought here, could you give us an example of what one of these sets would be, giant sets or glycolytic type of sets? What would they be? Because anaerobic and aerobic, as you said, a lot of people are familiar with what that is. Above 2 minutes worth of effort, you start digging into aerobics and whatnot. You start, burning into fat energy and whatnot. Within, I think, I forget how much effort before you cross over from anaerobic into glycolytic. But for the most part, the majority of workouts are anaerobic in terms of your traditional strength or bodybuilding type workouts, right?
Yeah, you got to get above 15 or 20 reps typically to kind of get out of the ATP anaerobic range and into glycolytic, and then that can carry over. You can very quickly get into oxygen debt, so you have to make sure the muscle tissue is being taxed enough. So here's a good example. Squat obviously is very extensor dominant. You're pushing from the ground up. You're extending your knee, extending your hip joint. And so if I'm focusing on that as a movement, that's going to be my heavy day. I'm starting with squats. That's kind of all I'm doing for an hour is squatting. On an alternate day, if I wanted to do giant sets and really allow not just the quads to recover a little better, but that entire movement pattern to recover, it wouldn't be unusual for me to say, okay, I really want to now focus a little bit more on the accessory muscles. So I want to really hit my glutes and my hamstrings and upper, TFL a little bit more than just my quads. So I would start with a hamstring curl, superset into a leg press, and then superset again. So giant set maybe into another functional type movement like a goblet squat or lunges, or maybe even just something, smaller movement based like extensions. But it's not just saying, okay, I'm going to do 60 reps combined and I'm done, so I'm breathing hard and sweating. Mm-hmm. It's just gut-wrenching work. So we're still pyramiding weight up. By the time we're done, we might be hitting 600-800-pound leg presses for only 10 reps, but you've got the pre-exhaust of the hamstrings coming in, so you're really feeling your hams and glutes kick in more into that leg press. And so by the time you get there, the end set still might take 2 full minutes to get accomplished, but it's brutally fatiguing to the muscle. It's not just a cardiovascular endeavor. And so that's what I mean by really hitting not only a glycolytic energy system, but differently than just the squatting. Otherwise, you could just squat lighter weights and maybe, pre-exhausting the squats. But I feel like at that point, you're probably just overtraining that movement.
Right. Okay. What's a TFL? You mentioned TFL.
Tensor fascia lata, small muscle up by the glute that kind of acts as a flexor and extensor of the hip. It's what connects the IT band, up to the hip.
Yeah, and the IT band's on the side of the thigh. Real painful for a lot of people when they roll it out or get a nice tie kick, low kick to the side of the leg.
Exactly.
Okay, so you're not just doing the one giant set. You're doing multiple giant sets, right? Oh yeah,
that's the whole workout.
Okay, so could you, if you don't mind, just break it down for us? Just give us those 3 exercises with the sets and reps, if you wouldn't mind, and rest periods.
Yeah, so I might start out, again, I'm warming up, and so the first set of hamstring curls might be 50 or 60 pounds, going into a leg press with a plate or 2 on each side. And hamstring curls might start with 15 or 20 reps, leg press 20 reps. I kind of have a 20 rep rule where, I'll keep adding weight until I just can't get 20 on my own. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go one deeper where I can use an assist, but still hit 20. That's where I know I'm just holding myself back from doing too much strength work and just repeating that and probably overtraining. So, and then as I said, I might do a goblet squat. So I'm making my glutes work a little harder at the end. So that might be also 15 or 20. By the time I get about 8 sets in, I might have moved up 20 pounds at a time on the hamstring curl. So at the end, I'm curling maybe 200 pounds for, 5 or 6 reps. So that's heavy, but that's my hamstring work. I'm not doing hams on days I squat. So this is my primary day for hamstrings.
Right. Yeah.
And then now with my hams kind of pre-exhausted, now I might be into my top set of leg press. And I like a leveraged axis-based leg press instead of a sled. It's just a lot easier on your low back and knees, so you really feel more in your glutes. So I might be up to 8 or 10 plates on each side there. And this is where, again, now that you're 6 or 8 sets in, giant sets in, you've been training for 45, 55 minutes, to get 10 reps is starting to be brutal. Oh, and then all of a sudden you've got 12, you got 15, your partner's there helping on the last couple. Then, you've got that last set of auxiliary work, which might be goblet squats, lunges, reverse lunges, which I like to do a lot, or extensions. So the whole workout, again, is a complete leg workout, but I'm picking a handful of movements where I can move away from just being quad dominant and strength dominant. Then when I come back into my next workout, which would be heavy squats, I feel much more recovered, both from the movement pattern and the fact that I haven't had direct, squat level quad work.
Right. So how much rest would you take in between those sets? Minute, 2 minutes?
Probably a good solid 2, because your heart rate, you're going to want it to come down. Yeah.
Oh man, that sounds brutal. And you said something. You said that your rule is 20 reps, and if you feel that you have to get an assist, do you mean like a force rep, like an assist to get that final rep? Is that
I'll use a partner or just my hands for the last set. Just the last set. Again, I'm trying to be disciplined and not turn that intensity workout into a strength workout.
Gotcha. Okay, so roughly 8 rounds of this, 8 sets of this, and a couple of minutes between, and that's your workout done, and you are cooked.
Yeah, you could do the same thing for back, for chest and shoulders, that kind of thing. When I love the primary movements. I love the whole powerlifting perspective and as a basis for my training. But to mix in some of those functional movements and, as I said, build that resilience in different energy systems and movement patterns, I think that's a lot of the stuff people miss.
Yeah, it's very interesting. What you're describing sounds like it may, flow along the lines of like a power bodybuilding. You're combining kind of a powerlifting with the bodybuilding.
Absolutely. And all this stuff, when I started training like this and developing some protocols, it was long before CrossFit and so forth, but now with some of those dynamic movements coming back in, that's essentially what they're doing, but just with Olympic lifts and functional movements. And I was kind of replicating the same thing with traditional movements.
Oh man. Okay. We got to get you back on the show, because I went way over digging into that, but I couldn't help, man. That was really
Great.
good. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
I love it.
Yeah, no, excellent. You got me. Like I said, man, I want to go train now. I can imagine that the pump must be, there's a term that they throw around on YouTube, stupid pump. And I'm thinking that must be a ridiculous pump by the time you're done.
Oh yeah, it is. I've had many training partners lying on the floor in those kind of workouts.
Yeah, holy moly. Okay, Joe, man, we're at the end, man. We went over a bit here, but man, it was really good. I really enjoyed this. So I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the listeners.
Thank you. It's a blast. I really appreciate it, Ray.
Yeah, no, this was fantastic, man. I love it, man. You get to learn every time you talk to somebody. I mean, this is really good. I really appreciate this. And I appreciate you putting up with all the follow-up questions, because I kind of went off with the follow-up questions, I think, on this one, but really good. I really like this.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, I wonder if you could do two things for me. First of all, where can we find out more about you? Because I know there's got to be people listening to this who are thinking, okay, where can I get me some more of this goodness? Because I'm thinking to myself, I would not mind to be doing some of these workouts right now. That sound like a ton of fun. And then if you wouldn't mind after that, just giving us some parting advice.
All right. Our website is thedietdoc.com. And we have our performance information kind of buried in there. The Diet Doc itself is our interface with the world for our weight loss and health consulting. So as you mentioned at the top of the program, we have over 70 locations all around the world. And that's what we really love to do as a business. All the stuff we've been talking about, the fun training, performance type stuff, that's a huge part of what we do with clients in that realm. But, that's a small part of the world. And for the population that we're trying to help become healthier and so forth, thedietdoc.com is where we have all of our programming. And, to be honest, it's our biggest business push is not only helping those end consumers and clients become healthier, but we absolutely love helping fitness professionals develop nutrition programming skills and programs that can help them build a business. So these 70 locations we have around the world, we consider ourselves business consultants, and our Diet Doc licensing program is a great system in a way that we mentor these business owners, giving them our intellectual property, our systems, our books, our resources, thousands of podcasts, webinars, videos, all funneled into this one system they can use as an exclusive Diet Doc program owner wherever they are. And that's what we spend a lot of our professional time doing. So among all the fun personal lifting and so forth information on thedietdoc.com, you'll find that. But to me, that's also my parting advice. I think a lot of people listening here end up becoming inspired to want to craft a career out of their passion, which is health and fitness. And I've certainly done that, and you're doing that. And so I love to come alongside people and say, man, let's make that dream come true. Let us help. We've got the resources and the systems in place that we've been working on for more than 20 years, and we can help you enjoy a great business as you're helping people do what you love to do.
Okay, so this is excellent. We have a lot of trainers who listen to the show. So you have something for somebody who wants to, who is in the business, who wants to get into the business, and also for those who are looking to be actually coached or trained. Like, I mean, I know you have the 50 Days to Your Best Life program. Mm-hmm. In addition to these other programs that you mentioned. And you know what? We didn't even get into any nutrition advice. I mean, that's something that we got to have you back again to go into more detail and touch on that stuff as well. So
yeah, that's my forte. I mean, all the training, all the stuff we've talked about from my physical therapy and lifting background is just a blast to dig into. But nutrition's a different world, and that's what most people need help with. And to be honest, that becomes the most lucrative part of a fitness business. So like you said, a lot of the trainers who work in gyms or they have their own studios just don't have a systematic way of helping people with nutrition. And that's where the general population spends their money. 86% of our population in the U.S. does not belong to a gym. They do not go to a personal trainer. And that stat was the same 20 years ago. So it's still an untapped market where a lot of these trainers are looking to acquire more clients, yet 86% of the population won't even look at them. When you have your own Diet Doc operation, we just, for example, started the Diet Doc London, Ontario. We have 3 in the Toronto area. And so all of a sudden, when these fitness professionals can say, I own the Diet Doc in this area, the exclusive rights, all of a sudden they become the nutrition leader with that kind of credibility embedded into their business instantly. So from the business development, the marketing, the systems, we do it all. And that's just a real fun thing I mean, we've had our careers, and now to help other people enjoy theirs is a blast.
Okay, so I completely missed asking you about nutrition because we got too much into the iron. And okay, now it's official. We got to have you back on.
All right, we'll do it.
We do, seriously.
I love it.
Okay, so lots of good information. Guys, check out the site. And I'm assuming you're going to have information for both sides, correct? Those who want to be coached and those who want to learn how to train or coach people even better, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We do it both.
Okay, and that's just simply at the dietdoc.com.
Mm-hmm. They can contact me through there. They'll find our contact information, and we'll get back with everybody very quickly.
Okay, so THEDIETDOC.com. The good doctor has spoken. And I think the house call is over for today. I think we come out with a clean bill of health. He's given us a good prescription to follow, I think. And
awesome.
I think I'm done with all the corny jokes here. So
no, that was quick. You were on a roll. That was good.
Okay, I got to tell you, this is really good. I really enjoyed this. So
likewise,
we're gonna have you back on, and excellent stuff, man. A lot of good advice on here. A lot of stuff from the motivation to the life lessons to training advice. So thank you again very much. We went a little over, as I already mentioned, and I appreciate you having the patience to share all this hard-earned wisdom, man.
It was fun. Seriously, you are good, Ray. It's really good to get to know you here.
Thanks, I appreciate that. As I said, man, I just ask questions, and you guys bring the gold. So
you're good at it.
Thank you very much, guys. You know what? You hear me say it all the time. The only real shortcut is finding someone who's been there, done that. Okay? So, Joe here actually has something to offer, not just people who want to train, but people who want to train others. And whether you're looking to improve your business or improve your body, he's got solutions for you. So, guys, I highly, highly, highly recommend taking advantage of the various resources that our guests have. And you heard Joe talk here, man, and I mean, just a pile of gold, and we just scratched the surface. I mean, there's a whole nother aspect we didn't even touch here, nutrition and whatnot, and we only talked about, really dug into one thing, giant sets. So I'm assuming that's only one out of a million arrows in his quiver. So guys, take advantage of it. TheDietDoc.com. Okay, highly recommend getting that information. This man has been in the game, in the trenches, competed at a very high level, has spent years and years and years and years educating himself and training, learning through experience, learning through studying. Reach out and take advantage of it.